Hi, I'm Hal Kempfer, national security analyst on multiple television stations, television news networks, and also a retired Marine intelligence officer. And I'm going to talk to you about three things that we can look for with the European leaders meeting summit in London going tomorrow, which is Sunday this weekend. The first thing we're going to look for is a lot of support for President Zelenskyy of Ukraine. He's coming off that very contentious meeting in the Oval Office with President Trump and Vice President Vance, where they literally were shouting at each other, for lack of a better term. And of course, that meeting was supposed to result in signing this big agreement with the U.S. and Ukraine on rare earths and other minerals. And that went nowhere. It died. President Zelenskyy left the White House and immediately flew over to London, where he got a very warm reception by Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Anyway, you're going to hear a lot of talk about that, supporting Zelenskyy, supporting Ukraine, and condemning Russian aggression, and putting a very different tone from what President Zelenskyy was hearing in the Oval Office. Number two, you're going to hear a lot of discussion about European security and the need for various European member nations to really step up and invest in their own security, their own defense needs, and to lessen the reliance on the United States. That's something the U.S. was saying to them directly. That's something, certainly following this meeting yesterday, that they all have been thinking about, all have been talking about, and I expect you're going to hear that very loud tomorrow from that meeting. Number three, you're likely to hear a lot of discussion on those frozen Russian assets. About $300 billion in Russian assets were frozen after they invaded Ukraine. About $220 billion is controlled by European nations, mostly European Union nations. Only about $5 billion is actually controlled by the U.S. The U.S. has had a big say in this because we've been so engaged with backing up Ukraine. But as we have lessened that support for Ukraine and we've kind of pulled back from prioritizing European security in very vocal, very public ways, the European nations are stepping forward and stepping up. And there's been calls from various capitals, Estonia, from the Czech Republic, and elsewhere, that the days of freezing are over and it's time to start the days of seizing. In other words, to take those assets and reallocate them to pay for the military needs of Ukraine and possibly reconstruction. So expect to hear at least something rhetorically coming out of that meeting. Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you catch me on YouTube, on Hal Kempfer TV, where all of my media appearances are posted. I also hope you go to the STRAT podcast, that's STRAT for Strategic Risk Assessment Talk, STRAT. You can find on Apple, Captivate, Spotify, YouTube, in fact, most major podcast platforms.